Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, Jeff, we've got a lot of things taking place all across the globe, but we're going to start our first article at the UCLA Medical Center in California, where 179 people were exposed to a superbug, 2 of those people which have died as a result. The cause? Contaminated medical devices called endoscopes. The devices have been known by the FDA to be the cause of bacteria transmission between patients since 2009. In 2013 through 2014, the FDA knew of at least 135 patients being harmed elsewhere.
Wow. Well, the concern is that the devices could be made safer, but the FDA has refused to enforce updated sterilization methods. So it's obvious someone has dropped the ball at the FDA, said Sharon Beagley, a Reuters health correspondent. Now, the endoscope used at UCLA was made by the company Olympus. The devices are inserted down a patient's throat, and because of the complexity of the devices, it makes it hard for them to be properly cleaned afterwards.
It's hard to clean the little cameras and everything on the end of there. Well, hospitals involved in previous outbreaks took steps to sterilize the devices, like exposing them to bacteria-killing gas or even quarantining devices altogether. While most hospitals have taken extra precautions to sterilize the endoscopes, the FDA still has yet to require stricter safety procedures.
Now, a new set of guidelines has been released in regards to dietary recommendations for the USDA. Looks like there's a change on the horizon for what's healthy and what isn't. Now, 2/3 of American adults are obese, and over 117 million have chronic disease that has been tied to a bad diet and lack of exercise.
Wow. Well, for the first time, the committee has made some new recommendations. Here are just a few. For your coffee lovers, it's okay to drink 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day. And also, previously, the old guidelines recommended no more than 300 milligrams of cholesterol. That's about equivalent to 1.5 eggs a day. But now they say cholesterol is not a concern. Research has shown that eating cholesterol-rich foods doesn't necessarily translate into high blood cholesterol levels.
Well, as the drought continues, record levels of warm weather has been experienced in the West, even as far north as Alaska. And California is still suffering exceptional drought in 93% of the state. Now, even the World Cup ski event had to be canceled because of a lack of snowfall. Also, Nevada's Lake Mead Reservoir, which provides water to 20 million people, is less than half full, and the farmers in Oregon fear that water rationing may come this spring due to a low snowpack for the winter. So not much snowfall is going to translate into not a lot of water coming down in the spring.
Right. Well, scientists are blaming a ridiculously resilient ridge of high pressure, that's their words, that has been blocking winter storms and keeping temperatures above normal. Although Northern California did see rainfall, mountain snowmelt provides 1/3 of California's water. The latest survey found the Sierra snowpack at just 12% of normal, just 12%. That's very low. And scientists are predicting a 4th straight year of drought for the West, and even in Hawaii, they're experiencing a drought in 50% of that state.
Wow. Well, California has gone extracting 30% groundwater to 70% groundwater to supply the state's needs. Now, they currently have only about a 1.5 to 2 years of the groundwater reservoirs left. Now, after that, there's nothing left. Wow. Scientists are saying that we are on a point to see mega droughts, the worst that this country has seen in 1,000 years. Now, over the past 4 years, droughts in California have cost billions of dollars in losses from agricultural losses, the fire damages, and also that translates into lost jobs.
Right, right. Well, naturally occurring droughts, scientists say, last normally at the most 10 years. But they say if we don't act soon, droughts could last for 20, 30 years. And scientists say that even if we can find a way to cut down on greenhouse gases, which they are saying is to blame for this increased drought that we're seeing globally, the likelihood of a mega drought still rise on the horizon at 60%.
Wow. Well, hydraulic fracturing has been a shaky topic in the state of Oklahoma. The state has been having so many daily occurrences of microquakes that seismologists are worried that a bigger quake is on the horizon. Historical records have never shown much seismic activities, but usually Oklahoma might see 1 or 2 quakes annually, but now the state is seeing 2 or 3 quakes every day, according to the U.S. Geological Survey.
That's a huge difference.
Huge.
So why all these microquakes? Well, as we said, most of these quakes, they're measuring about 3.0 or more on the Richter scale, and it's due in part to fracking, and it's a method used for extracting oil and gas. Now, in fact, there have been so many quakes in the state of Oklahoma that in 2014, there were more quakes measuring 3.0 or higher than any other state in the continental U.S., including California, which is known for its popularity in earthquakes.
Well, just 4 years ago, a 5.6 quake hit Prague, Oklahoma, shattering all previous records. Now, other U.S. states that are involved in the practice of fracking have experienced an increase in earthquakes believed to be due in part to hydraulic fracturing. Now, the American oil and gas industry has a lot of political pull, and the debate is out concerning hydraulic fracturing and its effect on the environment as well as human health.
Well, irregardless, it's definitely having an impact. Well, from the instability underground to instability among the nations, we now turn our attention over to the east. YPN's Larry McGee has our story on the trouble brewing in Yemen and the gas crisis in Ukraine, as well as President Putin's recent call for a peaceful solution. And lastly, some very strong words of caution coming from the Jordanian King Hussein to both Israel and Palestine. Larry, what puts Yemen in the news this week?
The American embassy in Yemen has been conquered by Yemenis insurgents who are now being reported to be in possession of the central parts of the country, including the Yemenis capital. Military officials say that before abandoning the post, U.S. embassy officials were careful to destroy important documents and to disable any weapons that were left behind. Yet despite those claims, Yemenis insurgents are nonetheless being reported to be in possession of American vehicles and some weapons. Analysts have been quick to point out that U.S. embassies are not just foreign offices responsible for furnishing visas, but are also very valuable for military and political purposes. And to that extent, the loss of any U.S. embassy, including the recent loss in Yemen, represents a significant and tremendous blow. That, of course, has not escaped the attention of government critics who are suspected to use the recent defeat as an opportunity to criticize the president's diplomatic approach to foreign policy, which has strongly hailed U.S.-Yemenis relations on terrorism as an example of successful cooperation. Both the UK and France have also poured their staff as Yemen is being annexed into Somalia, Syria, and Libya as yet another stronghold for insurgent fighters. To the northwest of Yemen, yet another front in the global conflicts which Pope Francis has recently labeled a piecemeal World War III. Vatican and U.S. ally Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk is striving to discontinue all gas purchases from Russia. Yatsenyuk says, despite the naysayers, the Ukraine was able to make it through last year's winter, and he is confident that they can pull it off again without buying from the competition. With its reserves only 29% full, however, many observers are doubtful and foresee a cold winter for Ukrainians if a new deal isn't struck with Moscow this coming March, when the current contract between the two nations is set to expire. The frost in Ukraine is more than just an issue of gas, however, as the fighting in the east of Ukraine continues between those loyal to Orthodox Russia and those supporting the West. The U.S. claims that Orthodox insurgents have broken the truce 250 times since it was enacted recently, while President Putin, speaking on a visit to Hungary, urged the Ukrainian government to exercise self-control, stating that only a peaceful solution, devoid of military force, is capable of putting an end to the ongoing conflict. Back in America, Jordanian King Abdullah II met with President Obama and emerged from the conversation with a stern warning for Palestine and Israel. If the two parties are unable to reach a two-state solution, then they will be faced with what he called a one-state solution, where the only options are democracy or apartheid. President Obama has also publicly pledged to work closely with Jordan in its effort to support the Vatican-backed quartet and push both parties to negotiate a peace accord. The Jordanian king has stated that Israel would be making a grave mistake if it chooses to further delay the resumption of peace talks. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
I guess we'll see how things occur over the next few months there.
Well, continuing our attention now with these wars in the Middle East, President Barack Obama requested Congress give authorization for the U.S. to use force against ISIS. Now, even though the U.S. warplanes have been bombing ISIS targets for almost 6 months, the president is now seeking permission for a 3-year campaign which carefully outlines how the fight will take place, including under what circumstances American troops would set foot in the combat zone.
I know that's a big concern, and the president's formal request to Congress is due to his belief that ISIS poses a serious threat to national security. The proposed authorization would be limited to 3 years, but could allow the fight to expand beyond Syria and Iraq to follow ISIS wherever they go.
Well, Fox News strategic analyst Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters was asked if he thought Congress would give their authorization, and he had this to say. In some form, it will pass, and it should pass, he said. It's important because Congress represents the American people, and when it comes to fighting Islamist extremism, we need to all be on the team, he said.
That's right. In reference to any U.S.-led ground campaign, Lieutenant Colonel Peters said, the president is always focused on his domestic base, domestic politics, not on strategy. But we know none of us want an enduring large troop presence on the ground in the Middle East. In fact, they've been really fighting against that in the recent conflicts that the United States has been involved in. And he said, we don't want that. Of course, nobody does.
Nobody does.
That's right.
Well, even though the U.S. continues its bombing campaign from the air and the Iraqi army is putting up a fight on the ground, ISIS continues to spread like a virus. Now, while the Iraqi army managed to push back militants in Erbil, they reported at least 48 of their soldiers from the town of al-Baghdadi were burned alive just 5 miles away from an air base where the U.S. advisors are stationed.
Wow. Well, ISIS recently showed its power in Libya by beheading 21 Coptic Christians. Now they are saying, Europe, you are next. And ISIS appears to be moving into all the cracks in the Middle East. The places that have unresolved conflicts such as Iraq, Libya, the Sinai, Syria, and Gaza. The ISIS movement is consuming the Middle East, infecting Europe, and showing no sign of stopping there.
Well, according to the Quilliam Foundation, a UK-based think tank, the Islamist State militants are planning to use Libya as a gateway to Europe. Now, the think tank came to this conclusion after analyzing numerous letters written by jihadist supporters. Now, in an interview with RT, Danny Mackay, an activist for a Syrian youth movement in the UK, was asked if this threat is real. He said, well, to an extent. I mean, Libya's proximity to Italy makes it one of the most significant countries ISIS could use to attack Europe.
Mackay went on to say the letters essentially suggests that ISIS terrorists within Libya want to flood the south of Europe with militants posing as refugees. Now, these militants want to pose as refugees and inhabit the area of southern Europe until they reach a number significant enough, to cause social chaos and social problems, and to actually spread their anarchy and terrorism from Middle Eastern countries in North Africa into mainland Europe.
Now, the president of Egypt is calling on the United Nations to intervene in Libya. He believes the world needs to take action to eliminate ISIS there. While Egyptian warplanes bombed at least 2 of ISIS strongholds, the president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, said ISIS is a threat to world peace and security and called for immediate, urgent, and effective action from the international community.
Now, this call to action is coming in response to a video that was posted online by a militant operating inside Libya who has sworn allegiance to the Islamic State. In the video, the alleged beheadings of 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians is shown. Since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi and bombings of Libya by the West in 2011, the country has been in a state of disarray. In the video, one militant speaks in English, threatening that Europe will be next.
Oh. You know, in Katan, if you remember back to the Bush administration, where then President George W. Bush, you had Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, Dick Cheney, they all spoke about the Iraqi regime possessing these weapons of mass destruction, biological and chemical weapons, and they said it was all backed up by facts and solid intelligence. And now, you know, we know today that that is regarded as one of the biggest media fails in history.
Right.
Now, you just have to wonder if what we're seeing today with ISIS is the same way.
Time will tell. Well, the Islamic State is announcing that it is going after Rome next, saying, quote, "We will conquer Rome by Allah's permission," end quote. When asked how concerned should the people of Rome and Pope Francis himself be about this threat, Raymond Flynn, former mayor of Boston, said, well, the Vatican is, of course, the center of religion, certainly the Catholic Church, the capital of the Catholic Church, and so it is a big target. There's no doubt about it.
Now, he went on to say how several things should be done to protect the Vatican. For starters, he advocates tighter security on the borders, saying, I lived there almost 5 years. It was one of the easiest countries in the world to get into, whether you're coming in from the Adriatic Sea or you're coming in from the Mediterranean Sea or from northern Italy. So ISIS would basically have free, open borders, he said.
He also said an international security force would be needed, one that looks out for specific places that attract large groups of tourists like the Vatican, Paris, New York City, and Los Angeles, for example. The former mayor acknowledged the threat of ISIS terrorism spreading worldwide should be taken very seriously.
Now, in a 3-day summit, the White House administration is calling on community leaders from 60 nations around the world to play a bigger role in halting the spread of violent extremism and offer a, quote, positive alternative.
Well, President Obama, writing an op-ed in the LA Times, endorsed new approaches to the evolving threat, saying, quote, we know that military force alone cannot solve this problem, nor can we simply take out terrorism, terrorists who take out innocent civilians. We also have to confront the violent extremists, the propagandists, recruiters, and enablers.
Now, the goal for the summit is to prevent people from being radicalized toward violence by exploring economical, educational, and entrepreneurial development. Now, in an idea that if I give you hope, you will be less likely to go out there and kill. Now, they all hope to develop social media tools. They're also hoping to develop these social media tools that are going to counter the extremist narratives that they're putting out there and trying to recruit people and, you know, promoting the violence.
Some type of a positive counteractive
right.
to that. Okay. Well, the term Islamic extremist is not used at the summit. Several White House officials have mentioned it is not that they're unaware of what's happening. It's that they want to be careful not to create this us versus them narrative. All throughout the Middle East, there's this false narrative that the Americans, the U.S., is at war with Islam. So they're trying to be very careful.
Now, in his op-ed, President Obama pointed out the peaceful nature of Islam and the twisted interpretation that motivates terrorist groups, saying, with Al-Qaeda and ISIL peddling the lie that the United States is at war with Islam, our campaign to prevent people around the world from being radicalized to violence is ultimately a battle for hearts and minds. And those were his words, hearts and minds.
Well, that's interesting enough, Jeff. The president speaks about this ultimately being a battle for the hearts and minds, or of the hearts and minds. And he says that twice in the editorial. Obviously, he believes that more than anything, we need to change the way people think. We've got to start there.
Well, along those same lines, in an interview, President Obama stated, I think that for us to be successful in fighting this scourge, it's very important for us to line ourselves with the 99.9% of Muslims who are looking for the same thing that we're looking for, peace and prosperity. And so I don't quibble with labels.
So in other words, let's accentuate the positive and work on eliminating those negative points. Well, unlike the president's peaceful approach, Senator Jason Rappert suggests the use of nuclear weapons against ISIS. The Republican called for the U.S. to take increased military action in a Facebook post, saying a strategically placed nuclear weapon would save the lives of our soldiers and quickly turn things around. It is time for this insanity to be stopped.
Now, Dr. Rebecca Glazer, a writer on several topics, including political Islam, religiously motivated violence, and warfare, said the problem with using nuclear weapons is that they are unable to discriminate between combatants and civilians, and also is likely to have a severe environment consequence, and most importantly, would break the nearly 70 years of global nuclear restraint.
I think we would have something far worse than what we saw with Hiroshima and Nagasaki if those nuclear weapons are unleashed. Well, she went on to say it would be unlikely to stop ISIS, who is gathering recruits from around the world, including Western nations, and those recruits would only grow in the wake of a nuclear strike.
Well, I would like to think that the leaders of this world would have enough common sense not to use nuclear weapons to solve their differences. However, the prophecies show otherwise. Yeshua Hawkins, the overseer of the House of Yahweh, has been preaching the warning message of the soon-coming nuclear wars and pleading with mankind to learn, practice, and teach the peaceful solution instead. As this last generation allotted to mankind is upon us, the last call for salvation is going out from the only prophesied established work on earth. Don't miss out on your one and only opportunity to be a part of Yahweh's eternal ruling family. Contact the House of Yahweh today and request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter and find out how you can avoid this sudden destruction.
Here's what you can do. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yeshrohawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can email them at info@yahweh.com, and for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, another informative message from the House of Yahweh. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.